Let Fragments of Silicon be your umbrella.
Welcome to a new installment of Fragments of Silicon. I'm your host, Adam, and as always is Galax and Pettyfan. Right, so we are skewing the usual formats because we have a lot of ground to cover in our interview this week, and we only have so much time to do it. About an hour, well, 50 minutes, but, Anyway, without much further ado, we want to welcome to the program, after... Think about it, it's been about 5 years, Tom Crago of Tantalus.
Thank you. Great to be here. Time flies, huh?
It does. Now, I remember it was 2017 we had you on last because we were talking about Rhyme and Sonic Mania for the Wii U, for the Switch, and
I guess we would have done Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess on Wii U. By then too, huh?
Yeah. In fact, that portion of the interview actually made the news rounds. I remember that showing up in Destructoid.
What did you guys get me to say something that I would subsequently regret? Was that what happened? I don't.
I remember it was about how many prototypes you did.
Yeah. So is that why you've got me back for more newsworthy tidbits when I've got my guard down?
I'm potentially. There are a lot of reasons that we have you here.
We do make it a point to play nice with NDAs because those are serious business.
Yes. Sure are. And I've got to be even more careful now because when I last spoke to you, I was speaking just for me and my company, but now post last year, I'm part of a bigger group, so potentially there'll be corporate PR that will be assessing my every word.
The corporate ninjas will be out in force.
In fact, I think I see them.
Just remember we're broadcasting live, and it's and we would like to not have to pull the episode and have it scrubbed. That happened once.
Or immediately go off the air after we hear the sound of broken glass.
So a publisher made you pull?
No.
Someone broke an NDA.
Yeah.
Oh.
Somebody broke somebody else's NDA.
Yeah, that's the worst kind of NDA break.
And then immediately realized their mistake and had us take down that episode. And he actually did the editing on that to get rid of the compromising information, let's say.
Well, that's nice of you guys. I mean, you're just honest workaday journalists. I mean, if someone says something, then you have a right, I suppose, to be able to broadcast it. But I guess, you're not in the business of...
I mean, technically it got broadcasted out.
Yeah.
But it didn't get, put into the records.
Yeah. If somebody else has it, they haven't mentioned it.
Yeah, I'm it was pretty much, after we were done broadcasting. Mm-hmm. So it's unless they were listening live, and sometimes when we get newsworthy events, it's it's not the live show that gets the rounds, it's the recording. But anyway.
And then you get picked up, right, and quoted on different sites, and then people think, I wonder what this Fragments of Silicon business is, and maybe go and have a look at it for themselves or listen.
It's happened before.
We've also had where we've not been attributed correctly, but yeah.
It's and sometimes it happens with the live show, with the House of the Dead episode.
We did House of the Dead on Sega Saturn here at Tantalus back in the 90s.
Yeah, and a friend of mine, let's say, works on the remake.
Right, I see.
Anyway, so getting back on track here, you mentioned that Tantalus is now part of a larger organization, and that is I don't think we've actually talked about them on the show, but they are the Keywords organization.
Exactly.
Yes, it's like I don't, and they've made maybe not as many moves as say the Embracer Group or Tencent, but they've made quite a few moves in acquiring video game companies in the past few years.
Absolutely.
And I suppose the question in that regard is, what made you want to join Keywords? What was the allure there?
Yeah, good question. Look, I wasn't thinking that I would sell the company, but then a few things happened globally. We were all part of them. The pandemic was the big one, and all of a sudden, 1 billion extra people started playing video games. So our industry boomed. A lot more money came into the industry. There were a few companies, and Embracer and Keywords are two of them, that figured that it would be a smart play to acquire developers in this growing market. For me, I mean, I've always kind of run this business relatively intuitively and kind of done the things that I want to do, for my team in terms of projects and so on. Not really that focused on P&L, certainly no budgets or forecasts or any kind of corporate stuff. But then during the pandemic, I just had this moment where I thought, wow, we're actually tracking like pretty well here. Like we've got money in the bank, we've got good projects, we're working with Nintendo, so a few kind of welcome flags. And I thought, well, maybe now would be a moment to consider bringing on a partner, selling it. And I had a few approaches at around that time, and one of them was.
Show us as being online.
We're back online now. I forcibly restarted it because it was saying no connection.
Okay, there it is.
Yep.
All right. Yeah, sorry about that, folks.
Just wanted to make sure I was.
It's fine.
Just keep an eye on that. This will be marked as part 2.
That's why I have it open.
Yep.
All right. Anyway, Tom, you were saying about Keywords.
Yeah, so the business was tracking pretty well, and I had a conversation with Keywords, got to know the key people there a bit better, and thought about what a partnership for them would mean for me and my people, and made that call. So, Tantalus has been around since '94. I've been running it for more than 20 years. A big moment in our history to make this decision to sell the majority of it, to partner with a big global company like Keywords. And yeah, look, it was the right thing to do. So I've joined now as one of their 50 studios. They also own Climax, High Voltage, Heavy Iron, Electric Square, and others. So we sit alongside those studios as part of the group, and really just continuing to do what we've always done, but with the backing, I guess, of a big and supportive brother. And the thing about video game development is, even when times are good, there's still always this fear, and it's a very well-founded fear, that calamity is only just around the corner. So now that we're part of this bigger group, those fears have dissipated a little, and we can feel a bit more stable and secure as we try to grow and look for even better projects.
Okay, that's good to hear. And nothing's really changed since the buyout.
Yeah, so certainly I'm more inclined to grow the business. I don't have to, but it feels like the right thing to do, knowing that we can weather any storms that come along. I've always been pretty conservative, actually, which is a strange thing to say in an industry that's anything but conservative. But we've never had any debt. We've never had any bank loan. I've always had to make payroll month in, month out, and that gives you a bit of kind of risk aversion, I suppose. Whereas now, not only are we in a really exciting space in terms of the overall industry, but now I've got this big, powerful backer who's saying, let's go for it. So, we're growing, not in a crazy way, but we're definitely adding to our team here in Australia, and we're also acquiring other businesses here. So we bought Wicked Witch earlier this year, who've been a long-time partner of Tantalus. And they're now part of our little group here down under.
Well, that's good to hear.
In fact, partner on Jupiter and Mars. So they were the developer that worked on the lion's share of that game, and they also work really closely with us on Age of Empires. And they're still their own studio, still at their own location with their own brand and so on. But we've brought them more into the fold, and we're going to collaborate with them even more.
I'd imagine, given that you like their work enough to bring them into the family, so to speak.
Yeah.
And indeed, you've worked on a number of titles in the interceding years. I suppose the first of which we'll start with is City Skyline. You brought this to the last generation of consoles, the Xbox and the Nintendo Switch. Did this hit the PlayStation?
Yeah, so originally we developed it for PlayStation 4 and Xbox One. That's the first titles that we ever did for Paradox. I'd known those guys for a few years, and we always kind of joked that we'd never get the chance to work together because they didn't do any console stuff. And then one day, I think we were in Paris or in Cologne at a video game event, and one of their senior people said, look, actually there might be an opportunity here with City Skylines. It was a big game for them on PC, and they thought, why not console? They'd had one crack at it, which didn't work out with another developer, and asked if we'd do it. And we were desperate at the time. I think it was Gamescom, and it was one of those trade shows. And I've had many where I was like, I need to do a deal here, And luckily, my friends at Paradox came through, and we actually really lowballed the quote to do the work because we really needed it. And ended up hitting it out of the park. And the main thing, with these games that are PC games is you just have to find a way of making the control system work with a gamepad. And we just sort of really quickly found a way of doing that for City Skylines, and we've been working on that game ever since. So, Colossal Order developed the game on PC. Mm-hmm. We then take their work and bring it across to console.
Is that still happening to this day? Because I know that got some DLC this year.
Yeah, sure is. Yeah, so we bring everything that Colossal Order do on PC over to PlayStation and Xbox, and we also did a Switch SKU. That was an interesting one. Nintendo were actually involved pretty heavily in that with Paradox, and we were able to do, and it was a significant pain in the ass, that SKU. Let me tell you, just because of the nature of the game and the specifications of the Switch. But I think we did a pretty reasonable job of bringing the experience onto Switch a couple of years ago.
Yeah, I can imagine. It's a pretty small space for something like City Skyline. And
City Skylines, it's a massive simulation. It's really CPU heavy, and the Switch, it's an extraordinary platform. We know that, but certainly you can't really compare it on a CPU basis to the kind of PCs that people are used to playing City Skylines on.
Indeed. And what was the most difficult part of getting City Skyline on the Nintendo Switch?
Well, the weird thing for me, I was just so proud of our team the whole way through, and to get these big cities, because you're building a city, right? It grows, it gets bigger, more complicated, and I couldn't believe how good the simulation ran on the Switch, even with big cities. But of course, then you get reviewers who play it, and it reviewed okay, but there were plenty of reviews saying, well, I've got 1 trillion people in my city, and the frame rate drops on the game. For me, it's like, well, no shit, it drops. You're playing it on a handheld. It's such a different beast to even a console. So the hardest thing for me was kind of, I guess, processing that criticism and then realizing that maybe we actually should have approached it differently. Like, we kind of tried to brute port the whole thing over from PlayStation and Xbox to Switch. And maybe what we should have said to people is, well, you're not going to get the whole game. You're going to get a version of it that is good, that's more suited to Switch, but that isn't the same complex simulation that you get on the other platforms. And I actually learned quite a lot from that. And it was difficult because I was so disappointed to not have it, to not have it universally praised and revered in the way that I thought it might have been.
I mean, I understand that
but
that's
it wasn't
also a
really
game
tough.
with a really big modding scene.
Yeah, well, yeah, I mean
That just
well,
won't
exactly.
translate probably.
Yeah, we do a bit of that on console, but yeah, I mean, it really goes to show the extent to which that's kind of the future of video games, doesn't it? That this user-generated content really drives a lot of the uptake and the replayability of games like that.
I mean, it's sort of back and forth with where the future lies in terms of video games, but like especially with subscription-based services on the rise, and games as a service, and let's just say those ideas are not all that conducive to modding.
Modders are going to find a way, though. I think they'll just come up with something different for themselves. Suddenly we'll wake up and there's 10 million people playing something we never heard of that's not on any subscription or anything. That's one way it could go, I think.
That's a fair point. And it's not like I think people keep forgetting that games are still being released for sale. Like, it's not the Netflix problem where all of the Netflix content is kind of tied to that app. I'm sure there are some subscription exclusive games out there, but they're not many. So if
although I suppose we'll start to see that more and more, won't we? That you will need to have subscription X to play game Y. I think that's inevitable, or at least despite what plenty are saying, you're going to want to kind of ring fence a bit of content in your own service, I'd suggest.
It's a concern. It's definitely a concern, but we'll see what happens in that arena. Like, games may be too expensive to, or at least AAA stuff. I mean, this is the reason why Sony has stated that they're not bringing their first-party games to their revamped PlayStation Plus. At least not now, because they cost too much and they need people to actually buy them to recoup. I mean, Microsoft can do that because they're Microsoft. I mean, they can buy Activision Blizzard and kind of shrug it off. They have that much money.
Yeah. I think you're right. The maybe that kind of dual speed economy, I guess, of the big releases that, a lot of people still want these games in a box too. You kind of go out and you spend your $80-90 on that, and then pay your subscription to get a chunk of other content alongside it.
Yeah, a lot of people do like Game Pass and stuff for some things, but some people just still want to own things permanently or physically.
Yeah.
But yeah, and physical is definitely diminishing. It's still not completely gone. I'm not sure if it'll ever be completely gone, but it's like the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Series X have released with digital only versions, and nobody bats an eye, which is a far cry from like 10 years ago. Like, I remember when the PSP Go got released and everyone had a conniption that it was digital only.
Or Microsoft's pseudo digital only stance on the original Xbox One.
Yeah, which cost them a generation, among other things. But anyway, so pressing forward in the conversation, I'm going to switch the order of the games here because I do, just in case we don't have time, I do want to get to this game because I'm pretty sure that if people are checking out the interview, this is going to be the game that they want to hear about, and that's, of course, The Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword HD. Like, though I suppose my first question is in regards to the previous Twilight Princess HD, and I'm not sure if you can answer this, but it is worth asking. Have there been any attempts to bring Twilight Princess HD to the Nintendo Switch?
No, and look, we'd obviously love to do that, but that hasn't been a priority for Nintendo, or at least not in conversations that they've had with us. And the way it works with our friends over there is we'll jump at any opportunity we can to work on one of their titles, and there's a constant dialogue between our two companies. Often there's a little bit of time that passes between titles, and there might be other ideas that are kicked around, but in the case of Skyward Sword, well, some time passed, and then the email comes. Would you be interested in considering bringing Skyward Sword onto Switch? To which the answer, of course, overwhelmingly is well, yes, we would. And then we enter into the conversations with Nintendo around what that might look like, and eventually we get underway. So it was similar in a lot of senses to how Twilight Princess came to fruition.
That is interesting you bring that up, because let's just say I have a friend who's kind of been lamenting the difficulties in working with Nintendo because they want to remake some of their previous titles, let's say, and he has claimed that Nintendo's been gun shy about that kind of thing. And if it were up to
us, we'd go back through the catalog and kind of do most of them, I think, wouldn't we? But we all know Nintendo. They're an incredibly intelligent company. They don't take decisions lightly, and I think they've got a pretty clear sense of what, in their view, will work on Switch. And I mean, I don't think I could have picked a better one than Skyward Sword. The ability to bring that Wii Remote gameplay to a Joy-Con. I mean, I've always wanted to do that, because, and for me, I think it's, dare I say it, a comparable and in some senses superior experience playing it with a Joy-Con rather than waving around the Wii Remote. So I personally,
the adding the ability to move the camera freely was nice.
Yeah, there were some good little control things we did. Well, I think the main thing we did, though, I mean, this is the first Zelda game at 60 frames a second, and we're able to do it at 1080p as well. So I think it just looks so nice in comparison, I suppose, to the original, while retaining that same art style, very sympathetic to the nostalgic feel of the original.
Yeah, and I'm sure there's plenty of questions to ask about in terms of what's going on under the hood as well, because you mentioned that this is the first Zelda game running at 60 FPS. Was that a difficult task, or was it just because, you're putting a Wii game on, a much more powerful system?
No, look, it was difficult. So increasing the frame rate, boosting the resolution, these were among the significant technical challenges. In doing that, you've also got to up-res the great majority of the textures in the game. So we spent a big chunk of time on art. That was a significant component. Look, when you take a very old game and try to bring it to a new platform, even where the new platform's more powerful, it introduces, almost line by line technical challenges that need to be resolved, and it was a complex project.
I have no doubts, because, as you said, that's the way people think these things work versus how they actually work. As it's like people think, oh, it's a old game, it'll just run smoothly on more powerful hardware, when no, that's not how it works.
There's a difference there's a difference, let's say a difference between working and winning. You can get something to work, but if you really want it to excel, and obviously the bar with Nintendo is set extremely high, you're then playing around at the edges, so the last 5%, in the case of Nintendo, the last 1%, to really make the thing near as damn it perfect. And a lot of the work's at that extreme.
Right. And was it more difficult to bring Skyward Sword to the Nintendo Switch or Twilight Princess to the Wii U?
Yeah, good question. Look, they were certainly comparable. I think we learnt a lot throughout the Twilight Princess process. We were a bit more confident in our methodologies and in our strategies, I guess, in relation to the development of the game. So probably Twilight Princess was harder, which is not to say that it was a less challenging project. We just were a little bit more comfortable in that seat.
I think that makes sense. And did Nintendo have like the same oversight as Twilight Princess?
Yeah, exactly the same. So it's Aonuma-san. I mean, in terms of Zelda, he's controlling all the levers. So you're in a meeting where in the scheme of the game, it's a kind of regular production meeting, and Aonuma-san's there and making suggestions and recommendations and so on. So we work incredibly closely with that team over in Kyoto on both those titles.
I'd imagine so, especially given the proximity to Japan.
Well, the same time zone, more or less. So that's rare for us. It's usual working with studios really on the other side of the world.
Right. And I suppose another technical question I have is you mentioned the motion controls of the Joy-Cons versus the Wii remotes. Was that a hard thing to get down? Was there like different calibrations you had to do? Tell us the story of making that motion control work on the new platform.
Look, I mean, it's the hardest thing because we're working away at this, and all we're imagining is Aonuma-san with the Joy-Cons in his hand, assessing, critiquing whether it feels okay, and especially since. I mean, it's hard to understate the significance of Skyward Sword from a gameplay standpoint. I mean, here's this controller that we've never seen on the Wii, and here's a game about a freaking sword, where you're waving this controller around. I mean, that kind of was the game. And the great majority of people loved it. A few people didn't. So what we're trying to do is replicate the joy, the freedom of that experience on a totally different piece of hardware. And we felt that we had the potential to be criticized for it, but we also felt here is a huge opportunity, especially for people who maybe found it challenging or a little bit kind of exhausting waving the Wii remote around, to give them a different option with the gamepad.
Also, Switch Lite users as well.
Well, totally, and of course it had to work for those users.
God, I could imagine somebody trying to wave a Switch Lite around like a Joy-Con that not ending very well.
So yeah, look, having it work, button only, joystick only was probably the biggest challenge for us. And it's not that there's 50 engineers sitting in a room writing lines of code to figure it out. It's more just, okay, well, let's take a step back. Let's really think about what we're trying to achieve here from a gameplay and feel standpoint, and keep on making suggestions, working back and forth until we nail it.
And how long did that take?
Well, I mean, it took a year and a half, so it was a long process making this game. I don't know on what day we were actually able to pronounce that we'd nailed the control. It certainly wasn't right at the last minute, and we certainly sent lots of different options and suggestions to Kyoto for their review. But yes, it was a big part of the process. And also with games like this, if we hadn't figured that out, Nintendo just wouldn't have published it. So they're not going to put something out there that doesn't really resonate with the Legend of Zelda, with the fan base, and with the legacy. So we knew that we really needed to get that right.
I'm sure it was a tremendous pressure.
Well, this is kind of what we do, I suppose, and sometimes we don't. So, we've had titles cancelled in the past where we haven't got it right. We always back ourselves to do it. But I mean, I guess if you want a seat at the big table, you have to be willing to really step up and show what you can do, and that's what the people who work here do. And yeah, it's nice when it works.
No doubt. And shifting focus here back to the graphics, Was there any difficulty in making sure that the art style, because Skyward Sword has this not quite cell shaded. I've heard it described as kind of something out of a Monet painting, but was it a difficult thing getting that art style getting up-res without like losing what made it so unique in the first place?
Yeah, look, absolutely, and I talk a lot about nostalgia and sentimentality in this sense that when someone plays the remake on the new platform, who had played the original many years ago, the experience or the reaction that you want is, oh my God, I love it. It's exactly the same. So you want them to think that. But then, of course, when you compare the screens from the old and the new, they're in fact very different because we've added a huge amount of resolution and detail to the textures. But we absolutely want to give that sense of feeling like the original, of going back in time to the moment when you loved playing that original title. So I think we did a pretty reasonable job of that. It's a light touch, so it's a lot of work to do very little. But yeah, there were most of the textures in the game were up-resed and worked on.
Makes sense. And I know this is a debate that's become more prevalent, especially as more and more remakes, remasters, that kind of thing get released, and they change things, they add things. Like it's come up today, time of broadcasting / recording, with the Sonic Origins, and the old Sonic games are getting delisted from most electronic stores next month.
God damn it, Sega.
Well, we did Sonic Mania on Switch.
Right.
We love Sega. I haven't seen the movies yet, I must admit, but maybe I need to put that on my rotation at some point in the future.
Right.
I mean, they're supposed to actually be good, so.
Well, this is what I've heard. So I got to bite the bullet.
I've heard different things, from they're legitimately good to they're good for kids' films to they are not good. But I'm like,
they're not a complete disgrace to the name of Sonic the Hedgehog, which
is
the bar is that the bar is that low.
Yeah,
so.
the bar is somewhere to like 3 inches above the ground to step over.
I mean, let's be honest here. The Super Mario Brothers movie is looking like it's going to be kind of a disaster, just given that it's been pushed again. And we haven't seen anything. We haven't really heard anything since they announced the voice cast. That's a bit of concern.
We just set the bar at absolute disaster. So kind of a disaster is actually a win, So depending on where we set that bar.
Of course. Anyway, and what was it like working on the Nintendo Switch versus the Wii U, and just in general? Like, was it a more pleasant experience?
Yeah, absolutely. I think things get better with most hardware, to be honest. I mean, every now and then there's a bit of a blip. PlayStation 3 was a pain in the ass. But for the most part, as new hardware comes out, the way that it's built, the way that the SDKs work, it tends to get easier. And also we know the platform better, and certainly Switch. It was an order of magnitude more pleasant to work on than the Wii U. Nintendo figured a lot out throughout the process of building and releasing the Wii U, and a lot of those learnings found their way into the Switch.
Makes sense. Let's see if my colleagues here have any more Twilight Princess or Skyward Sword questions for you before we move on to the next game.
I have my big question is, did Nintendo want you to have the full button controls done before they announced Skyward Sword, or is that something, if it was ready by then, cool?
I think we'd finished the whole game before they announced it.
Well then.
They tend to announce. Look, I mean, I don't have any insight or visibility into their announcement process or the motivation behind that. But yeah, I mean, we were pretty much done when this game was announced. And of course, then there's all of the secrecy too in development, where even, you know, working on the thing for a year and a half or more, and you can't even tell your children that you're working on a Zelda game, because all it takes is one child going on one podcast and talking about what. And,
My uncle who works at Nintendo. Wait a second, hold on.
yeah, so look, it's a challenge keeping it a secret, that's for sure, and it's really, really hard because you're proud of what you're doing, and you know, you kind of want to tell at least your family, but yeah, we have to keep it pretty tightly guarded, and of course, no you know, work experience kids or interns either.
God.
It's a tight ship.
Or heaven help you if you tell your friends about such things.
Well, I mean, it's easier not to, really. I mean, you don't want to kind of be the, certainly for my staff, I mean, imagine being the person that inadvertently spilled the beans and for that to have cost us a relationship with Nintendo, or, you know, or the embarrassment.
Once again, it almost happened on this show, but, you know, we won't delve into that. Oh, no, not on air, at least. Anyway,
that was a fun half hour, but never mind that.
Anyway, moving on, I suppose we should talk about the game we actually have on display here, and that's Stellaris Console Edition. And in fact, you were talking about it a bit in the pre-show. And just like the difficult, you know, we talked about how difficult it was cramming City Skyline into the console space. I'd imagine Stellaris here was a whole magnitude of order more complex.
Look, absolutely, and we're talking about a game whose DNA really is on PC. I mean, elements of the game really resemble a spreadsheet that you're able to kind of play through and have fun around. To take that to console with a gamepad was really challenging, and it was our lead designer here who did that job on both City Skylines and on Stellaris. And I take my hat off to Tim for his accomplishments there to get to the point with Stellaris where, wow, you know, it actually feels okay to play on your couch on a console compared to hunched over your PC. So not sure how that one would go on Switch. That'd be a more difficult challenge again, but we're pretty happy with the way that runs on console. And similar kind of deal, that's actually developed internally by Paradox in Sweden, and we get their DLCs on PC and we bring them across to PlayStation and Xbox.
And like, how do I put this? What was the most difficult part of, you know, cramming Stellaris into the console space?
I think from a technical standpoint, from an actual, I don't know, grunt standpoint or brute force standpoint, I don't think there were as many problems with bringing it across to console in terms of, you know, processor power or whatever else. The lion's share really was user interface and control. So, you know, UI particularly, how do you display all this information in an intuitive way? And, you know, we've had a lot of experience with this. We did Mass Effect 3 on Wii U, where we kind of redesigned elements of the user experience to leverage the fact that we had two screens. You know, we had a screen that was a controller on the Wii U. So that's a feather in our cap, and I think Stellaris is another. And look, you know, we don't as a studio go out and develop a whole heap of really amazing new original games. What we do really well is adapt games that are beloved, bring them to different platforms, and enable people who have those new platforms to have a great experience. And you know what, a lot of that is down to UI and control.
Yeah, that sounds like a challenge, and I don't know, I wouldn't mind seeing Funky Barn return. Like,
well, what do you think on Switch maybe?
Sure, like Funky Barn worked well enough on the 3DS.
Well, because you know, we did a Wii U version.
Yeah.
What did we call that? I think we called it something else on Wii U. It was basically the same game. Was it Bonanza on Wii U? 505 Games published it. But I liked it on Wii U. I thought it was pretty cool.
I think it was Funky Barn on Wii U and Funky Barn 3D on the 3DS.
Okay, cool. Oh, that's right. Well, we tried to do it on mobile, but we never released that. I think that was going to be the one that was called Bonanza. Yeah, wow, that's going back a little bit. Yeah, let's start a campaign to get Funky Barn on Switch. I'd be all for it.
Right, and you do remind me with the Mass Effect 3 on Wii U. Is the Straight Right brand still alive?
Yeah, good. That's a good question too. So, not really. No, I mean we brought that out with Mass Effect and with the Need for Speed game that we did actually for EA on mobile, just to differentiate the more core titles from the kid stuff. But as it's transpired, we haven't really felt the need to persevere with that. We've just brought everything else under the Tantalus banner. So Straight Right notionally exists as a brand, and certainly for those legacy titles, but it's all Tantalus now, and Tantalus is part of the Keywords family.
Okay, good to know. And shifting back to both Cities, Skylines, and Stellaris, because we haven't delved into this direction yet, but I do want to do so now. That is, are you working on bringing these titles to the current gen, the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Series X, with enhanced features?
Look, I would absolutely love to do that. It has been discussed. It's on radars in various parts of the world, but it's not something that we're working on today. But it makes a lot of sense, doesn't it? Like to be able to kind of really leverage the enhanced features and functionalities of the new hardware. I suppose, it's a question of whether there's a market for those games. Personally, I think, if you've just bought a PlayStation 5 and, you played the Matrix demo and you maybe kind of had a look at one or two other things, if you're into grand strategy games, I mean, imagine how sick Stellaris would look on that thing, on your big screen TV in your lounge room. We already know the controller works. I think it'd be a no-brainer. We'd love to do it.
I don't doubt that, and hopefully it'll happen. I know with the Xbox Series, it's all one SKU, but I also know that the PlayStation, you do have to have the individual pieces there.
Yeah, no, it's totally, it's a different SKU for PS5, a different game. And also, we'd want to make it better, right? I mean, we'd want to kind of add a few extra things and give it a bit of a brush up too.
And speaking of Xbox, that does bring us to the last titles for this session. That is Age of Empires 2 and 3 Definitive Edition. And I suppose to start with this line of questioning is, how did you land on the Age of Empires titles?
Yeah, so we had a pretty good relationship with Microsoft. It goes back a long way, actually. We did Unreal 2 on the original Xbox. So we started working with their advanced technology team on that title. I knew people at Microsoft before then even. They were weirdly impressed by the work that we did on Unreal 2. I think it was a game that no one thought could be ported from PC to Xbox. And was also, it was the first online console game ever developed in Australia, and it was kind of one of the groundbreaking online console titles at the time. We had some very smart people working on it. For me, it was more in hindsight that I look back on it and thought, wow, how did we even do that? So good relationship with Microsoft. They then asked originally about Age of Empires 2. And gradually, they kind of just hooked us in more and more. We ended up working on Age 1, the remaster of that. And actually, we had a bunch of people on Age 4 as well. So that was developed primarily by Relic in Canada. But we seconded a couple of handfuls of engineers on for quite a while on that title too. So we've been involved in the Age of Empires franchise in quite a holistic way for several years now. But like with all these things, it's relationships, it's reputation, trust, I suppose, and we've been able to build that with Microsoft over the years, and they're one of our closest partners.
That is good. That is good to hear. And geez, parsing the Age of Empires games. So let's start with the title, the Definitive Edition. what makes these Age of Empires games definitive?
They're better than all the ones before them, I suppose. Will they be definitive in the sense that they're final? Who can say? But for now, they're definitive. I don't know. It's just a word, isn't it? It's kind of, it indicates, I guess, that quite a lot of work has gone into remastering, remaking them. I mean, Age 3, wow. I mean, that was as big an art assignment as any conversion that we've done, maybe even the biggest in terms of all of the models and textures that we touched to bring the new incarnation of that game to PC. Huge project for us over a long period of time, because obviously, Age 3 is 3D, so you're kind of looking at a different set of challenges art-wise than Age of Empires 2 or Age of Empires 1.
Right. And were you involved with making any of the new content for Age of Empires?
Well, we work really closely with Forgotten Empires, so they're the studio that's had carriage creatively and design-wise of the Age franchise for some time, and we together work with World's Edge, which is the Microsoft studio in Redmond that runs Age of Empires. So it's really the three groups, I suppose, that work harmoniously to deliver this content. But certainly in terms of game design, that's led by Forgotten Empires.
Makes sense. And is there anything still going in terms of Age of Empires development?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've got a bunch of people working on Age titles. So Age 3 and Age 2, and Age of Empires 2. We're still developing new content for that. You'd like to think that Age 2 is a game that could go on and on and on as more people come to enjoy it. And obviously, Age 4 has had a very successful launch too. So we're seeing a lot of growth within the Age of Empires franchise in general.
Right. And has there been any attempts to bring Age of Empires to the Xbox?
What a good suggestion. Yeah, I mean, another thing that we would love to do, we'd have to overcome a similar set of challenges, I guess, in terms of control. I mean, maybe even more so than City Skylines and Stellaris. People are so used to playing these games on keyboard and mouse. So I don't know. Send your fan letters to Microsoft, and we'll see if we can make it happen.
All right. So I think we are getting low on time here. So my final question is going to be: can you tell us anything about any upcoming projects that you're working on?
I thought you would ask that, and I should have a better answer prepared. No, that we do have more coming on Switch, I can say that, and certainly continuing with DLC for the titles that we've been working on up until now. And yes, there's new stuff. I mean, we're growing, so we're expanding not just in terms of personnel, but in terms of number of projects. So maybe next time I'm on, I'll be able to talk to you about new Tantalus releases in late 2022 and 2023.
We would like that. And guys, do you have any final questions here?
I think I'm good.
What are you secretly working on porting Breath of the Wild to? Kidding.
What would that be? It'd have to be something that doesn't exist yet, right?
Yeah.
I just want to play Breath of the Wild too, like everybody else.
Yeah. Well, Tom, it was lovely having you back on the program. Great conversation. And indeed, hopefully it's not another 5 years before we have you back on the program. So whenever your next game or games get announced, we'll probably be in touch. Good luck to you in your future endeavors.
Thank you. A pleasure as always, guys, and I'll talk to you again soon.
Indeed. So Tantalus Media, they have worked on various projects. Since they are more of a developer, work for hire sort, their projects are found under a variety of publishers. Though I'm pretty sure, given how popular some of these titles are, you probably already own one of them. Anyway, Petty plays to the next segment. All right, welcome to the topic of discussion. So this week we are talking about the Dig Dug franchise and Mr. Driller, because Mr. Driller is a spin-off of Dig Dug, starring Dig Dug's son. I forget their official names.
I know Dig Dug is Taizo Hori.
Yeah.
I don't know what the kid's name is.
I mean, somebody will look it up here, but in the meantime, yeah. Bring up Dig Dug because I did say on the show that we would talk about it in the near future, and here we are. And I'm going to assume that our audience is, familiar with Dig Dug, has played Dig Dug, and if you're not, you can find a multitude of options to play the first Dig Dug. Namco, Bandai Namco, not shy about re-releasing Namco Museum titles, and Dig Dug is usually in the first package of the Golden Age classics, right up there with Pac-Man and Galaga and the like.
Mr. Driller is Hori Susumu.
Yeah, there we go.
So these are puns. Hori Taizo sounds like I want to dig, man. And Hori Susumu is continuing to dig, I believe.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, the original Dig Dug was, obviously not the most popular Namco title of the Golden Age, but it's probably number 3 from the top. Not, we're not really including Miss Pac-Man in this conversation because, well, see our conversation on Miss Pac-Man that we did not too long ago. But if I had to, I'd say it'd probably be Pac-Man, Galaga, and either Xevious or Dig Dug for the number 3 position. Then Galaxian under that. But, I think that right there is the core constituency of the Golden Age Namco classics. And indeed, Dig Dug is definitely deserving of that reputation. I'd say even more so than some of the other contemporaries like Xevious and Galaxian.
Careful, Adam. I might have to tell what the NES works that you're talking bad about Xevious.
Look, I know he can't get past Xevious.
I'm kidding anyway.
Yeah, but
it was revolutionary for shooters. That's about it.
Yeah, well, it's like Galaxian got leapfrogged by Galaga, which is its direct sequel. Not to mention the Gapless, underrated title, very underrated. And Xevious. Xevious is the cornerstone for the vertical shmup. Very groundbreaking, but also very leapfrog in terms of playability and technology. You go back and play Galaxian or Xevious, they feel basic today. Not in a good way. Dig Dug still feels very fresh. Probably because, Dig Dug wasn't iterated upon as much as those other titles. Even Pac-Man. That's not to say that nobody took inspiration or tried to clone Dig Dug. A good one from that day is Digger, which got a HD version back in the PlayStation 3 days. And I think another one that we talked about not too long ago, Balderdash. But, Dig Dug, it's actually talking about the game is kind of hard because it's one of those games that's also been talked about a lot. especially in classic retrospectives and classics focus. I mean, for fuck's sakes, Will Ferrell name checked it in a MTV Movie Awards parody about 20 years ago.
You don't have to be cool to know about Dig Dug.
Yes. So, Dig Dug is very known. Its gameplay is known. You dig around, you destroy the pukas and the fragars. And it's perhaps a bit unusual that pukas may be more associated with Pac-Man these days. I mean, if only because pukas keep appearing in Pac-Man. But that's a conversation for another time. Now, what I want to talk about here is actually Dig Dug 2. Because Dig Dug 2 is one of those sequels that doesn't get talked about a lot. There's actually a lot of sequels to very famous video games that just never resonated. Just Pac-Man alone, like the amount of Pac-Man games that didn't take would fill a broadcast, and I know
they'd fill a museum.
We talked about,
Wink.
like, every Pac-Man game way back in the day. Like, I think 5 or 6 years ago.
One might say they might fill a museum. Wink.
Yep.
God, I hated that one.
Yeah. But like Super Pac-Man, the direct sequel to Pac-Man, the actual direct sequel, that barely did any business. And like, if you want a good measure of how a video game did, especially back in the day, go and count the number of ports it got to home or computer systems. Pac-Man, the list is long, let's just say. Not that long because Atari had exclusive rights to Pac-Man. But, like the next generation, you get more, NES Pac-Man and so on and so forth. And Namco was actually involved in that one. But Super Pac-Man, this actually did get a few home ports, but those were like the C64 and I'm trying to remember the other computer, like maybe DOS, ZX Spectrum. Yeah, some 8-bit micros, but that's it. Like no NES version. Dig Dug 2, not as buried, but Dig Dug 2 definitely not really in the top in the conversation, and that's unfortunate because I actually had Dig Dug 2 growing up. It did get an NES version. So Dig Dug 2 was at least popular enough to get a NES version. I think that was brought over by HAL Labs. But anyway, so for those who haven't played Dig Dug 2, you might wonder what did it do differently. And the answer is it took the gameplay of Dig Dug and moved it to a top-down perspective. So instead of digging underground, killing your enemies with your bike pump and rocks, you are on a set of tropical islands. And the goal here is to use your digger, your drill, to break these islands apart and make sure that the frygars and pukas are on the side of the island that are collapsing. Or you can just use the bike pump. Guess what? The island method, that's where the points are.
Yeah, because there's multipliers involved.
And when you get down to it, it's basically putting Dig Dug into the gameplay of kicks. Not one-to-one, but the idea is basically the same. Draw lines to the connected points and, conquer territory. It's just, you don't have to get like 80%. It's about killing the enemies here, whether by bike pump or island collapse. And like I said, that's actually really bold for the golden age of arcades. Because, like, it's one of the most different sequels that I can think of from that time period. One might think it was from the NES sets, Zelda 2, Castlevania 2. I won't include
Some
Mario.
of them did kind of have a thing for like changing the view of the action, didn't they?
Yeah, and this is along those lines. Obviously not Super Mario Brothers 2 USA because, well, that story is its own thing, and I think everyone knows it at this point. But yeah, like I said, personally, I'm glad that Namco was bold enough to change things up, because they realized that more of Dig Dug wasn't going to sell. As it turns out, changing up Dig Dug this much didn't sell all that much either. But an attempt was made. I'll give it to him. And like I said, it's not only just that an attempt was made. Dig Dug 2 is a good game. Maybe not, iconic. Maybe not the classic that the first one is, but it's still a good game, and you should play it. And Dig Dug 2 does come out on the Namco museums every now and again. But once again, since it's a, let's say, lower tiered release in terms of popularity, it doesn't show up as much. And that is unfortunate. And there were a few, let's see, yeah. And, outside of ports, there's also Dig Dug Deeper, which is like a completely original thing made by Infogrames. It's part of a licensing deal. Yeah. But I suppose the most notable thing about Dig Dug Deeper is it had the idea for Dig Dug 3 before Dig Dug 3 happened. And yes, there was a Dig Dug 3. We know it as Dig Dug Digging Strike, which is an interesting release on its own because it sought to, it merged the underground gameplay of Dig Dug 1 with the island gameplay of Dig Dug 2. It used the dual screens. Admittedly, I don't know too much about how all that worked because I never picked up Dig Dug Digging Strike back in the day. And I kind of regret that. It looked at the very least interesting because, like, it actually has the poles underground, and I think you have to dig around those. And also worth noting that Dig Dug Digging Strike has his son as a character. Not the only one there, but this is as good as any transition to Mr. Driller. Because Mr. Driller, you could, like, from the first game, you could see the influence of Dig Dug on display, because when you get down to it, Mr. Driller is basically, what if Dig Dug but Tetris? Am I wrong?
I mean, not really.
Yeah. And, it's challenging in its own way. Spent quite a bit of time with the Dreamcast version of Mr. Driller, both like in its original CD and when it was on GameTap. But Mr. Driller is... I still got to get around to playing Mr. Driller Drill Land. I picked that up on a Steam sale, and I haven't gotten around to it yet. And yeah, this is, especially since people keep claiming that's the best one. I think it's because it has the most I think it's because it has the most content and just, the polish and the power of the GameCube. Because, like, Mr. Driller Drill Land was the big console push for Mr. Driller. After that, it just kind of gets sad and it's cut down downloadable games and such. Like Mr. Driller Drill Spirits. So that was... No, I'm thinking of Mr. Driller Online, which is the Xbox Live Arcade version. But no matter what Mr. Driller you play, its core concept is you're drilling down, you're going down a cave, and you have to destroy the blocks and you have to manage the blocks. And you do that by going through the colors. And what you got to make sure is that the cave doesn't collapse on you. You got to manage your oxygen meter, because again, you're in a cave, and apparently it's either like an underwater cave, or let's say it's filled with methane. There's a few reasons why you would be using a rebreather in a cave. And you gotta make sure you don't get killed there. And definitely one of my more favored puzzle games. It's a shame that it didn't do more business, because there were a few Mr. Driller titles we missed, like Mr. Driller 2 and Mr. Driller G, and indeed Mr. Driller Drill Land until the re-release. And I'm not sure how much more I have to say on Mr. Driller, because it is a solid arcade concept. Though, interestingly enough, I don't think... I'm willing to bet that there's an arcade version. I think that might be Mr. Driller A, because it feels like there should be an arcade... No, that is apparently Advance. Yeah, I'm not sure if there was an arcade version of this, because Mr. Driller feels like it's an arcade game that got transposed to consoles, when in reality it's actually a console game that never had an arcade release. Make of that what you will. I think. Anyway, any commentary from you guys about Mr. Driller?
Drills go burr.
Yes, they do.
Dig Dug Guy is also married to the lady from Baraduke, apparently.
Yeah, the Bandai Namco cinematic universe.
Yeah, if you ever play Namco Cross Capcom or something, you'll see a bunch of this stuff.
Yeah, and they also
made Dig Dug Guy disturbingly handsome.
Yeah, they also had an entire they also had an anime project doing various Namco properties that didn't go too well. I remember Wonder Momo being part of that. Anyway, so that'll about do it for this installment of Fragments of Silicon. The week ahead. Let's see. So we do have a new episode of Moonhawk Studios Presents happening in about 20 minutes. Be sure to tune in for that. We do have a guest this week, thankfully. And sorry, I'm looking for the proper week on my notes. There we go. On Friday, April 29th, we will be having Marvin Kruger of MK Arts and Visuals. Hopefully this time things will go smoothly, and people who are Petty fan will have their alarm clock set.
And also don't sleep past them.
Yes, set more than 2 or 3 if you need. But yeah, this is going to be an interesting one, because strictly speaking, we're not going to be talking about games, at least not in the traditional sense. Get ready for a lot of games as art conversation, because he does more arts and visuals in the gaming medium. So, gonna be interesting if nothing else. And coming up on the Sunday reviews, we will be having reviews on Kerr, The Mysterious Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, Faircroft's Antiques, The Forbidden Crypt Collector's Edition, and Moonstuck. So, look for those in the coming days. And until next time, I shall wish you good gaming.